So in this module, I'd like to talk a little bit about the nature of the different trades in different regions and times, and also what the consequences of trade was for both the Native Americans and the colonizers. So Native Americans were very selective in the European goods that they purchased and valued. So for example, we know that Native Americans were interested in pots made of copper and brass. And sometimes they actually cut these pots up and use the metal for other sorts of purposes, spear or arrowheads, for adornment, and so on. So they didn't always use the objects that Europeans traded for the same purposes that Europeans did. We also know, of course, that Native Americans were interested in European weapons, and sometimes Europeans, use and ownership and introduction of weapons is used to describe a situation in which Native Americans were completely helpless in the face of superior European technology. But it's important to keep in mind that Native Americans had their own technological advantages. They had geographical advantages, and they always knew the lay of the land. That sometimes arrows and other technologies for hunting were actually better than bullets and better than guns in damp, rainy, or snowy environments. That Native Americans had technologies like canoes, like snowshoes, and other sorts of modes of transportation that Europeans actually adopted and borrowed because they were often the only way to get around areas of French settlement in Canada and to really traverse the many rivers and to communicate between settlements for both Europeans and indigenous people all along the mid-Atlantic coast. So Native Americans had some technological advantages and a lot of important knowledge that they could bring to bear in these relationships too. And what we see with guns is that Native Americans actually adopted gun technology so quickly that sometimes the Europeans were shocked to find that the Native Americans that they encountered for the first time had more guns than they did. This happened when the Dutch encountered the Mohawk in the Albany, Fort Orange area. The Mohawk already had 500 guns they had acquired from other Native Americans who had acquired them from the French. And it happened to the Spanish, and when they encountered the Caddo people who lived just west of the Mississippi River for the first time in the late 1600s and early 1700s, and found the Caddo had more guns than they did. So the Caddo had been trading also with the French and with the English at that point, and had acquired guns from other Native Americans in general. So Native Americans very quickly adopted things they found useful, things that they found beautiful. The main thing, however, that Native Americans consumed was cloth. And in this, they were just like their European counterparts. So the single biggest import into the Americas from Europe all through the colonial period was, in fact, cloth. It was the one thing that Europeans in America really never made successfully in large quantities, large enough to sell or really supply their own needs. And it's something that, interestingly enough, Native Americans were very attracted to. So Native Americans were really happy to exchange their furs and skins and really happy to acquire cloth. Now, the Native American market also became a very distinctive market. So when they bought cloth and guns, they didn't buy the same kinds of cloth and guns that Europeans were buying. So manufacturers in Europe by the late 17th century and early 18th century were actually keying themselves to Native American consumers. So in terms of clothing and cloth, Native Americans liked to buy just giant lengths of cloth that they could use for lots of different things. These were called duffels or strouts. They could wrap themselves in them. They could use them as blankets. They could cut them up and make skirts or other sorts of things out of them. So this was a very common thing to see in account books of trade with Native Americans. Native Americans also liked linen shirts. And basically what they did is they wore them without washing them until they developed a kind of oily, they almost turned into like oilcloth from sort of sweat and body oils. And then they became also kind of water repellent layer. So Native American men, the wearing of the linen hunting shirt with Native American garments below, buckskin, leggings, and so on, became a very typical type of gear for Native American men in the Northeast and the Southeast to be found in. And in terms of guns, Native Americans demanded from manufacturers that they create special guns that had shorter barrels because they knew they'd be moving quickly through heavily thicketed and wooded areas. They didn't want the long barrels that the Europeans liked, for their formations and for their for the kinds of hunting that they did, for their military warfare, would get caught as the Native Americans tried to move quickly through the forest. So they wanted shorter barrels that they could keep up and keep from getting caught in the ground and in bushes along the route. So there's you see these specialized weapons. They also bought the latest technology of flintlocks instead of matchlocks, and eventually rifled barrels and so on. So it's very interesting to see that Native Americans always demanded. They knew what was the best technology and the newest technology, and they demanded it in supply and exchange. So these seem like the kind of benefits of trade for Native Americans. They're getting things that they want. Guns were good for lots of different kinds of hunting because unlike an arrow that could be diverted by a twig or a branch and miss its mark, a bullet would pass on through and kill that deer or kill that animal that the hunter was trying to hunt and so on. But trade also brought lots of changes and challenges into Native American society. So one change that wasn't necessarily a negative was just as political leaders and confederacies wanted to be the ones that controlled trade with Europeans, so too did individual families, have an interest in maybe making a play for leadership or being, more powerful and important within their community. They wanted to kind of elevate their kin network and clan. So individual families, were interested in creating opportunities for trade. And often they did this through relationships with European men. European men needed to establish relationships with Native American kin networks in order to acquire furs. So like the image of the Native American trapper, of the European trapper that we have in our heads is not really an accurate description of what really happened in the fur trade. Native American men were the ones that provided furs. Native American women had to process these furs. They had to process deer skins before they could be exported, and they processed the skins of beaver and other fur-bearing animals that needed to be worked over, chemically treated, etc., before they were really export grade and export ready. So you needed the work of both Native American men and Native American women in acquiring and processing. Now, many of the societies that the French and the English encountered in the Eastern Seaboard were in fact matrilineal societies. So in other words, people counted their descent and their family tree through the maternal line. When children were born, they lived with their mother, not necessarily their father, and the mother's relationships with her brothers and uncles were were very important male relationships. So in establishing a relationship with a French man, a Native American woman brought contact with her male relatives, with her brothers, with her uncles, with her nephews, who could help procure the furs, and with networks of female labor that could help process the furs. So for anybody interested in, a European interested in engaging in the fur trade, they needed to make a connection with a lineage group. So this meant that Native American women often assumed very important roles in both the organizing the fur trade and in then distributing the goods that the family and the clan and then maybe the town or confederacy got through these sorts of connections. And therefore, Europeans who often didn't recognize women's political power and often didn't see how important women were economically in these communities they were engaging with, did sort of understand that was the gateway to success in the fur trade. Anywhere that they engaged in the fur trade was at least beginning with these entry into these female networks. So as late as the 18th and 19th century, Native American women were still very important figures in the fur trade. And John Jacob Astor, one of the first robber barons, his name is plastered on neighborhoods in New York and on the Waldorf Astoria Hotel, famous hotel, actually engaged in trade relationships with Native American descended lineages who had for generations been involved in the fur trade and the exchange of goods in the Great Lakes region. So these patterns continued into the era of American independence and well into the 19th century.